Hi everyone, we're from the Anderson County Career and Technical Center. I'm Roxana Aguilar.
I'm Layla Hutson.
I'm Jason Davis.
I'm Stella Farrow.
Today we will be presenting about mental health around the world for our HOSA competition. We are chapter 90051 and we represent Anderson County Career and Technical Center HOSA. What we'll be doing today are these three things. So our schedule for class today we're going to begin with a bell ringer, which is going to be a reflection with partners. Then we'll move on to a presentation about mental health around the world. After that, we will have a quick assessment before ending with an exit ticket. Some standards that we'll be covering today are evaluate individual, group, and societal influences that promote positive and negative health behaviors. The second standard is explain how culture, media, and other factors influence other perceptions about body image, gender roles, and attractiveness. Some learning targets, so what we hope that you guys will be able to do after this class are, I can explain why culture, media, and other social factors affect mental health in different regions. I can identify differences between the perception of mental health on a global spectrum, and I can recall the influences that impact positive or negative behavior in mental health.
So for our bell ringer today, I would like you to take a look at these first images presented on these slides. You can talk to your partners or with your peers and tell them what your first thought is when you see these images.
So take a few seconds and look at the images and just discuss amongst yourself kind of what you think after looking at these images.
Okay, let's start to wrap this up and we can move on.
So I'm kind of interested in hearing, I want to call out a few people. We can take volunteers first. Does anyone want to share what they thought? What's up?
I feel like that they use their products to show that they can fit into society, but it pushes a certain standard on the people.
Okay. What about you?
The product looks like it would like to make them feel good.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts about?
The second one, I watched like a lot of Paramount Plus. It's like all over the ads, so it's kind of like strongly advertised.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's good to know that it's advertisement that's actually used. So thank you guys for sharing your thoughts, but now we're going to move on to our next slide.
Okay, so first we're going to start our presentation off by talking about beauty standards in East Asia, which go along with your bell ringer that we just talked about. And so the first thing that we're going to talk about is how they view their beauty standards. And so on this side, it says all Asian countries place strong emphasis on a V-shaped face and a refined jawline. Many have a double eyelid surgery to make their eyes appear bigger. A higher bridge nose is a standard that is highly desired amongst their communities. They prefer to have a petite figure, and they prioritize looking as young as possible for their whole entire lives. And then, so you might be wondering, how does this affect their mental health? And so this creates a constant cycle of anxiety and feeling insecure. It also makes them feel judged by their community. And then these beauty standards create a very toxic culture, especially for young women in East Asian countries. And so a little fun fact at the bottom is that South Korea has the world's greatest rate of plastic surgeries. And then over here you can kind of see a list of them. So there's nose job, jawline surgeries, and it actually says 1 in 3 South Korean women ages between 19 and 29 have had a plastic surgery. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about the mental health in schools in East Asia. And so how many of you guys know who your counselor here is at school? You guys know them? You talk to them? Okay, so in East Asian countries, they actually have little to no access to school counselors. So if something's going on, more than likely they don't have anybody to talk to about that. And more than 50% of students worldwide experience pressure to get good grades, whether that's from themselves or from their parents or families at home. And then children and teens make up 1/5 of East Asia's population. So that's a pretty decent chunk for a lot of these kids to be struggling with mental health when it comes to school. Mental health is not a topic that's regularly talked about in their schools. And most resources for mental health are only found in urban areas such as like in hospitals, so they're not really found out in more rural areas. And then over here we have some graphs. This kind of shows the increase and decrease of students that experience depression between 2014 and 2024. And then down here we have a pie chart that shows the different types of mental health that the students experience. And if you look, the blue actually is depression disorders, and that's actually the largest.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a different aspect with workplace mental health. There is a relationship between employees and employers that is very prevalent. The idea of like a hierarchy is something that's highly stressed. So 1/4 of employees feel burned out worldwide, but in Asia, it is 1/3 of employees. That might not seem like a lot, but in comparison, it quite is. So female employees are subjected to higher percentages of depression and anxiety compared to male workers, just because of their social norms. The biggest leading factor to this is workplace toxicity. So this could be your relationship with your boss, with your other workers, competition among your coworkers. And as you can see, my example is Japan. The culture gammon is enduring comfort without complaint. So workers here, they will do their work for hours. They will stay hours overnight at the workplace without complaint. So there is social pressure in the workplace. One of the traditions that they have is if you are new to your job, you will be humiliated to an extent in order to find out if you're a good or a bad hire, just to see them out. And as I had mentioned, there's a strict hierarchy culture. So the employee is expected to do what the employer says with no questions, and this also fits to the traditional family norms. So Joge Konke is the idea of seniority, age, and status relationship. So if any of you guys have taken a social studies class, you might have heard of Confucianism. It kind of follows these values. Here is a chart that kind of shows the reasons as to why some workers, Asian workers, feel burnt out, depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, distress, or high intent to leave based off of their workplace environment. So to continue off of what I had said, in East Asia, traditional family values are something that are highly stressed. So family reputation is favored over individual struggles. There is a fear of bringing shame to the family, and this goes along with filial piety, which is the suppression of emotions. There's also a cultural stigma that comes from generations of families. This could be based off of maybe experiences that they had during wars, maybe their workplace, their work isn't great, it could be poverty, but because of that, mental health is viewed as a weakness rather than something to help and make better. However, there have been improvements. So China has a 608 program, and this is something that is trying to be implemented. And basically the goal of it is to provide accessibility and equality of mental health care. Additionally, Korea has the mental health welfare law, which is aimed to reduce obligatory admission to hospitals, like this could be psychiatric hospitals, so you could seek out to get help without being forced into extensive events. It is focused on symptoms rather than disease, so instead of just ruling you into one category, you are allowed to say how you feel and go based off of that. This map shows the rate of mental health. As you can see in the East Hemisphere, it is very high, with blue being the highest.
So after that discussion on East Asia, we're going to hop across the globe a little bit. We're going to take a look at Nordic culture. So for those of you guys who may not know what part of the world we're looking at, so down here on the map you kind of see, we'll be talking about Denmark, but some other countries around that you may have learned about in your world cultures class. We have Norway, we have Sweden, and then it's right above Germany. So a little bit about Denmark. There are roughly 6 million people that live there. It is a country that's very central to the Nordic cultural identity. It has been a country since about 965 AD, so it's been there for a very long time as a sovereign nation. It's, like I said, in Northern Europe, so right about near Germany and Sweden, and it serves as an example to many other countries as to how to promote happiness. Now, one really interesting thing about Danish society and honestly Scandinavia and Nordic cultures as a whole are the taxations. So almost half of all Danish people's income is taxed. So that seems like a high amount. And despite this high taxation, however, many Danish people are extremely content and fine with the taxation because the welfare programs, such as free post-secondary education and universal healthcare, make up for it. And there's also other things that we'll be discussing later on in the slide.
So parental leave in Nordic cultures is quite different than it is in the United States. So in the United States, we do have maternity leave, but it is for a very short amount of time compared to Nordic cultures. So parental leave is much longer in the Nordic countries, and longer paternity leave helps take the job stress of returning to your job or bonding with your child. You have more time to do so. It also allows mothers to fully heal from having a baby, which is a very extensive care time. Similarly, longer paternity leave allows for the fathers to bond with their children, which is not guaranteed in the United States. No father is guaranteed paternity leave, but in Nordic cultures, they make that a priority to guarantee that the father gets to stay home with the mother. If you look over at this chart, you can see that most of the Nordic countries are implementing more days off for parental leave. That way that they can increase the mental health regarding, postpartum depression for the mother and the father. Increased paternal leave is a trailblazer for deconstructing stereotypes that men must serve as the head of the household and return to work immediately instead of supporting the family. So this is kind of breaking that stereotype of the mother's the one that stays home, allowing the father to also join in and help with a whole family bonding experience.
Yeah, so that stigma it breaks down is really important, and it makes these Nordic cultures kind of a unique identity, because even though Nordic cultures are very homogenous in a way, like ethnically and culturally, they're not very diverse. They have a lot of the same, ethnicities that live there. They also are incorporating ideas from other cultures, such as this, breaking that standard and breaking that stereotype, which is really interesting because despite the homogeneity in the country, they're able to implement these new ideas. So another cool thing about Nordic cultures is where they live so far up north in the world and so close to the poles, and they get a lot of winter. The winters there are very harsh and it's very cold, and they don't get sunlight for a lot of the year. So to prevent this, they have come up with 3 tips. So the first tip is sleep and social habits. So as many of you guys know, if one night you don't sleep the best, that next morning you probably won't feel the best, and it eventually will become a cycle where you could develop many sleep disorders that make it even harder to sleep. There are several sleep disorders out there that can affect this, like narcolepsy and other ones, but by having proper sleep hygiene in Nordic cultures, it promotes social interaction with friends, which by interacting with people, it makes you more happy just by default. And this can also help maintain the circadian rhythm, which is kind of like your biological internal clock that kind of keeps you on a sleep cycle. And then it also helps prevent weight gain. Another method that they use is light therapy. So one thing about using this method is that you have to use a device that emits light 20 times brighter than indoor lighting. So imagine like these lights, well, that's 20 times brighter than that. That's pretty bright. And so what this will do is also help balance that circadian rhythm, because it kind of mimics, they have something called a dawn alarm, and it's like an alarm clock that wakes you up with the sunlight. So it's kind of similar to that, because where they don't have as much sun, they have these things that stimulate the sun, so it's like the circadian rhythm is getting a help. And it also increases serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain that helps with happiness. The third thing that Nordic cultures do is they prioritize positivity. And while it may seem easy to do, it can be hard sometimes when you look outside and it's kind of gray, white, and just doesn't look the most inviting to go outside. But they've kind of embraced it, and they have a lot of snow activities. So the Winter Olympics are actually going on right now, and many of these activities are things that may be done in Nordic cultures. You got skiing, or cozying up with a movie, or even the very popular polar plunge that we do around here for fundraisers. So 2 words associated with Nordic culture are, the first one is hygge, which is a Danish word that means the quality of comfort that promotes contentment with life, similarly to how I was discussing positivity in life.
The second word is friluftsliv, which is a Norwegian word, and it means to have a simple life in nature without destroying or disturbing it.
So that's all the content we have today. If you guys, we're gonna pull up a Kahoot. So if you guys wanna get out your Chromebooks, we're gonna play a quick Kahoot for the game.
We just want to see what you've learned and how well you've retained information.
While we're loading in here and while we're waiting for our peers to come on, does anyone have any questions about the content we learned before we take this little short Kahoot? Anything, any confusion maybe about a topic we discussed?
Why is the Nordic culture better with positivity than Asian culture?
So it has to do a lot with the history of Asia, and like I had mentioned, there was a theory, or it was a philosophy called Confucianism, which stressed, like I said, hierarchy. So you had to listen to those superior to you. That could be your father, it could be your mentor, it could be your teacher. That was highly stressed. So that kind of has a lot to do with it, whereas with Nordic culture, that wasn't a part of their history. While they did have traditional norms, it wasn't as highly stressed, and it hasn't been retained as much in history.
Yeah, so like kind of she was mentioning, the Nordic cultures, they're very vastly different cultures. So in East Asia, have influences from Buddhism, Hinduism, Neo-Confucianism, a lot of Taoism, a lot of different philosophies that influence this. Whereas in, like I was kind of mentioning, it's very homogenous in Nordic cultures. So they have a lot of more, I think, Western ideas. So a lot of Roman Greco influences, a lot of Christian influences. So it shapes the culture a lot and just makes it a way different kind of, I guess, vibe of life. Another question?
Do they have like different religions?
Yeah, they definitely do. Asia has an incredibly amount of religions. If you look at different parts of Asia, there's like East Asia, there's South Asia. It really depends. I'm not sure about Nordic, if you wanted to go into that.
So with Nordic culture, it's kind of like I've mentioned, it's very homogenous. Protestant Christianity is very like the norm there, kind of similar to the religion that's dominant here. It's very Protestantism focused here, but there have been like a recent influx of kind of Islam because of refugees that have been migrating and immigrating to Denmark. There's been an influx of Muslim ideas in their culture. Any other questions we have before starting our Kahoot? Yeah, another one.
So you're talking about how U.S. and the Nordic cultures and how different they were, but like what other differences are major from those two cultures?
So I think one difference that is kind of like, honestly, I think you may hear this like on the news, or it's kind of stereotypical, but in the United States, it's kind of perceived that very open, very warm, very welcoming, because that's just how we carry ourselves. It's very like that's our culture, whereas the Danish culture is very, not more introverted, but it's more intimate. So they just have different values. It's not necessarily a bad or a good thing. It's just they have different values when it comes to social interaction and maybe maintaining, like I was mentioning, in those cold winters, you have to have your group of people to help you keep happy and stuff. So by having that intimacy with groups of people, it allows you to like have someone to rely on, whereas not having just a widespread network of people. So that's one other difference.
To add on to what he said, in the Nordic cultures, they heavily imply that they want you to go to school. So they actually pay for your school in the Nordic countries. That's why the taxes are so much higher there than they are here, because as here the taxes are lower, but we have to pay for our own education for the most part. So that's another big difference.
I would like to add on that in Asian countries compared to the U.S. countries, there, like I had mentioned, I said that personal relationships with your family is preferred over individual achievements, and that's just because in the U.S., many of you guys know that as soon as you turn in, you go to college and you live off by yourself, and that's just the culture here. Where in Asia, you go to school to support your family. You work to support your family. There's attachments and traditional values there. Okay, so is everyone in the Kahoot?
Let's begin.
Perfect.
So I'm going to read off the questions, or we're going to take turns reading off the questions, just in case you guys can't see it. So our first question is, what fraction of employees are burnt out worldwide? If you can't see it, the red is 3%, the orange or the yellow is 1/4, the blue is 1/2, and the green is 9%. So go ahead and get your answers in.
The winners get candy.
Yeah. Oh,
Good.
great
That's
job.
good.
That's
Good
awesome.
job, guys. Ooh, okay.
There you go.
Okay, so true or false? Female employees are subjected to have a higher percentage of anxiety and depression. Those are fast. Oh,
Oh, there
very
we go.
nice.
Okay.
How much of Nordic's people income is taxed?
Okay.
Molly's in the lead.
Is parental leave longer in Nordic countries?
Okay, there we go.
Light therapy can help with seasonal depression.
Okay,
Oh!
Hey, there we
Good
go.
job, guys.
Awesome. Moving on to our next question. What percent of students experience pressure to get good grades worldwide? So students like ourselves. Ooh, okay.
Why do people fear bringing shame to their family?
Hello.
That was a
Good
hard
job.
one.
Half and
That's a
half,
hard
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Roughly how many people live in Denmark?
It's similar to how many people live in Tennessee, so think about that. If you know how many people live in Tennessee. Yeah, there we go. Do kids in East Asia have access to school counselors? If you can't see them, the red is yes they do. And yeah. Oh, someone else took the lead.
True or false? Proper sleep hygiene promotes social interaction with friends and family. Good job.
Okay, let's see who the
All right,
winners
let's see
were.
who the winners were. So in third place we have Kennedy.
Yay. Okay, raise your hand if you want.
Second place we have Molly.
In first place, we have Emmy.
Yay!
Wait, raise your hands.
So now that we got done with our little game, I think we have one more activity
We do.
planned after this, and we're gonna hop back over to our slideshow. And yeah, so Roxana is gonna be passing out some index cards, and because we're gonna do a little bit of an exit ticket. So if you can get a writing utensil out, we'll explain what to do in a second when we get all the index cards passed out.
Alright, so for our exit ticket today, I would like you to do a little self-reflection and write down one thing that you learned today that you did not know before you walked in the room. We'll give you a minute to write that down, and then if anybody would like to share, that would be much appreciated.
If you want to put your pencils down when you get done writing and you get done putting down your thoughts, so we have a good idea of when we can start asking questions.
And talk to the person behind you or besides you real quick, just so ideas are shared.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to.
Would anybody like to start us off by sharing what they wrote? Go ahead.
Not all countries have equal school privileges.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
It's a good connection to make between the subjects.
I didn't know that light therapy helped your mood.
Yes.
I didn't know that either before,
Very
like
cool.
before we did the research for it. I wasn't too sure of that either.
I'm sure that's why if you go onto the sun after you feel happy you got some vitamin D.
Yeah.
Nordic people have a longer maternity leave.
Yeah, and so to be a little bit more specific, actually, we may not have discussed this, but to be more specific, and sometimes it can be as long as 3 years. So like that's some very long maternity leave, and because it's built in to give mothers a chance to really raise their kids and give them an opportunity to grow that relationship, all while not having the stress of having to go back to work and prevent, job loss, because postpartum depression or being depressed after giving birth is a very real thing, and Nordic cultures are trying to prevent that. Let's start off with you right there.
Not everyone has school counselors.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah.
Yeah, very surprising.
Do the Nordic people still get paid while they're on maternity leave?
Yeah. So that's the thing about maternity leave that's really good there. They still get a stipend from the government, and so one thing about it is that 3-year option, it's not that everyone takes it. If you take that 3-year option of having a maternity leave, that does mean that your stipend is going to be a little bit more reduced. So kind of like the shorter you take, the more your stipend, but regardless of how long you take, you will still have that stipend.
Okay, any last questions or statements?
Any last things we want to kind of share about what you learned or anything else? We can take one or two more.
Okay, it looks like we're good. Thank you guys for being such great listeners. We hope that you learned something and share it with your peers, discuss it, make those connections, and thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, guys.